Thanks for coming out and sharing your time this evening. Really appreciate it. So when Simon and I were talking about what do we want to do here, we decided we want to do an audience-driven thing. Rather than have us talk, we could speak for hours and hours and hours, but lots of exciting things. But actually have an audience-driven thing. So what I'd like you to do is pull out your phones and go to this URL here, polev.com/orgs. polev.com/orgs. So someone's put in coaching upwards. So if this resonates with you, you can simply go on your phone and upvote this. This is a topic that you want to learn about. You can upvote this. So you can add your own topic or and upvote other people. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the ones that are of most interest to people here in this group. So we have one topic so far. We'll look for you to put in the topics of what is it that you want to learn about, specifically the situation of making Agile successful, whatever that means for you. All right? It could be about culture, it could be about leadership, it could be about structures, it could be about people and how people are showing up.
Enterprise agility, yeah.
Enterprise agility, yes. So we're going to give you guys a few moments to enter your topics and upvote other topics to see what's of interest to people here in the city of London in October
2017.
Yes, we'll see what are the topics that resonate most, that people are most excited about hearing about, exploring, what's going on out there, Agile in the wild. We're really curious what's going on out there, so we can talk about those things, talk about what's really happening instead of what we think may be happening.
Yeah, and if you get stuck for something, what's happening for you? You know, what problems are you facing tomorrow?
So we're seeing coaching upwards, organizational politics.
Early market advantage, probably.
Oh, you think so?
I don't
Managing
know.
remote teams.
I know.
Performance management in a truly agile organization. That's a fascinating topic. Fascinating. Okay. So we can actually get started here. We can leave this poll up as we talk about things. Or we may switch to a different slide. So organizational politics. So do you want to start?
All I'll say about organizational politics is that in the type of structure, a hierarchical structure, we're in a capitalist society, we only have two threats. So we're not really fearful of our lives in our jobs today. We're not really fearful for someone coming and actually killing us. But there are two threats. One is from market forces. So this is where Agile helps in terms of market forces. This is threat from the outside. The next threat we face is from politics. This is threat from the inside. This is really what drives a lot of the behavior in our organizations. Threat from the outside and threat from the inside.
So why don't people shout out get a couple of shout outs of organizational politics means what? What does that mean? Like, how does that manifest? What are the problems that show up? Let's shout out a few things. Sorry, what? Fighting over who's leading what area. Fighting over control. Yes, exciting. What else goes wrong?
Preferring image and perception over feedback and learning.
Sorry, valuing?
Preferring image and perception over feedback and learning.
Right, image and perception. Right, yes, not feedback and learning. What else happens around politics?
Relationship-based decisions over meritocracy-based decisions.
Relationship-based decisions.
Relationship-based.
Decisions overturned by management.
Decisions overturned, yes. Yes. What else? Conflicting priorities, yes.
Hidden agendas and hidden systemic influences.
Yeah. So what happens, let's just look at the truth of what's going on.
Michael.
You have an organizational system that has certain characteristics. We could describe this characteristic with this black triangle. We could describe one of the aspects of the structure of this triangle is that you have politics. You have conflicting goals. You have people operating in certain ways. right, that are not aligned with high performance or even good performance. Right? True? This is what's going on. We say that our organization is not functioning very well. It's functioning in ways that are poor, that are not aligned with high performance, that cause frustration, disengagement. That's what's going on. Well, the question is, where does this come from? How did we end up in this mess of organizational politics? Who is responsible for this system?
How we hire.
Hmm?
Is it how we hire?
Is it how we hire? Leaders? Other answers?
Everyone.
Everyone? Wait, who has the power to change this whole system? Everyone has the power to change this whole system? Yes? No? Some people have more power. Well, look, if I was the leader of this little triangle down here, if I'm this leader here, I can change my little piece, right? I don't need to worry about the whole thing. But ultimately, when we see politics between our group and some other group, the problem is created higher up, right? So if we look at it, it's the leaders who are at the top who have the power. Not only do they have the power, they have the responsibility. They have the ownership. They have the authority to create things that are happening. The truth of the matter is, all the problems that we're seeing in our organization are a fractal of what we see in the leadership team. We often hear saying, how do we get these teams to work together? Well, it turns out we have conflicting priorities. Well, why? Because there's conflicting priorities here. This is the truth of the matter, is that all the things we're seeing, all the politics, are simply a reflection of what's happening in the leadership team. So there's only one fix for it. The number one challenge with Agile is organizational culture. We could also say the number one challenge with Agile is actually leadership. Right? If we have a context of healthy organizational culture, healthy organizational leadership, we can just drop Agile in and it works. That's the truth of it. So all we can do when we're lower down the tree is we can try to clean up our little part of the world. Whether you're in charge of a team, whether you have a small department, that's all literally we can really do without having people higher up change their behaviors. So organizational politics is a manifestation of this much deeper issue where our organization's not actually set up for survival, right? When we have all these politics, we're actually set up for failure. We will go to business because some other competitor will not have the politics. They'll have clear, aligned, focused people, and they're going to kick ass in the marketplace and wipe us out. That's the truth. And survival of the organization is optional, right? Dinosaurs, they're not here anymore. Stuff happens.
Sounds good to me.
Yes, organizational politics, so exciting. It's just a manifestation.
Okay.
Let's go on to the next one.
Coaching upwards.
Coaching upwards. Oh, so we're back to this. Oh, I'm here. Maybe you're not black. You're probably like, here you are, you're green. You got to get this Agile stuff. You know how to create a different culture system, and you maybe create this part of the organization that's kind of green, like a different culture system, this Agile way of doing work, a learning environment, whatever you want to call it. And you go, well, how do I help the people up here do this Agile stuff, have this different way of being, value people as human beings? Is that the problem? I know who put this one in here. Yeah, is that the problem? Or something else?
So my leadership team think they get Agile, and whenever you come to a point and you say to them, actually, that isn't Agile, they just go, don't tell me what Agile is, I know what Agile is.
Yes. Yeah, does anyone else have this problem that leadership thinks they know what Agile is, but they don't really know what Agile is? Okay, so we're seeing a lot of raised hands here in the room.
So imagine you put yourself in the position of a leader, of an organization. You've got thousands of people you're looking after, and someone comes along and asks you or tells you that you are not being agile enough. What do you think that person is? How would you feel?
That's a wrong question to start with, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's okay. What problems
Mm-hmm.
do you think the organisation has? What
Yeah.
what are you talking about? They look more interested in. You recognise we have a problem, and here's some ways we
Yeah.
might want to think about solving this problem.
So
And
it's-
Agile might be a means to solving some of it.
Exactly, yeah. So in that case, does it matter how agile the leadership are, or whether they conform to our value of what agile is?
Do they recognise you've got a problem?
Do they? Yeah.
£100 million a year.
Yeah.
We're doing this for the market. Our share price has gone up 10%.
Yeah.
Just because we said we're going agile.
These organisations are successful. Yeah, exactly. Does it matter?
In some ways, I've got
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got a problem.
So the actual problem then isn't that the organisation or the leadership are not agile enough, or they're not being agile. So if we're thinking like that, where's the problem? Yeah. So if we're thinking that the organisation, the leadership aren't agile enough, and they're happy, where's the stress? Where's the tension? Where's that being held? It's being held in us. We're the problem. Because the more we push, what's someone going to do? They're going to push back. So how do we break that? How do we break that cycle? Because we know that we want to do the right thing. We're good people, right? We're there because we want to help. We're there because we want to make people's working lives better. That's what we're there for, right? So how can we do this in an organisation where we want to help, given the problem that we've just stated? What would be a better way of approaching making people's working lives better, helping the organisation?
It's about pulling them towards you. So instead of pushing, it's the pulling to you.
So pulling them towards us rather than pushing.
And
And,
you can do it safely, but it's me.
yeah, sorry, I couldn't tell you it was talking.
Beginning to demonstrate really tiny little changes
Yeah,
where the improvement comes, and so by luring them to be curious about where that improvement came from, then you begin to link them up to the discourse.
yeah. So certainly incremental, small kind of changes. And how does this start? When you've got a if you've got a relationship, so to help somebody move on their journey, what's the first part of that relationship? If you're coming in as a consultant or a change agent,
Build trust.
build trust. And how do we do that?
By establishing shared understanding.
Yeah, shared understanding. And the first step of shared understanding. I'm kind of doing the why here thing, right? So it's kind of using the other thing. Listening, exactly, listening. That's the first step. It's us to listen to what's actually going on. Listen to the organisation, listen to what they need. These are the people running this successful £400 million organisation. If we don't listen to them, how can we possibly build a relationship and help? Is there anything you wanted to say about that, Michael?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just add on to what Simon said about the challenges because we really care. We really want to see something different in our organizations, right? That's probably why you're here on a, what's it, Tuesday night? Is it Tuesday? I don't know. I don't know what day it is.
Kind of.
Right? Because you care, right? Otherwise, why would you be here, right? So that's the challenge. So I think everyone in the room really cares about getting better outcomes, right? So put up your hand if you really want to see changes in your organization. Put your hand if you really want to see changes in your organization. Right? That's beautiful. Great. Now, what we can call that, everyone put your hand in the air. Usually what that comes with something called attachment. When you really, really want something, it means we're attached to it. And if we're attached to it, what that actually does is it blocks us from listening. It prevents us from letting leaders actually freely choose what they want. Whose decision is it what happens in the organization? It's their decision, right? So when we really, really want something, what's the move we make in our community? What do we do? What?
Shout about it.
Yeah, we shout about it. We evangelize. Agile evangelism, the truth is that it creates conflict in organizations, and it actually prevents any success with Agile. I'm sorry to tell you this. I'm going to repeat it again. Agile evangelism is actually something that prevents success in organizations. The characteristic of all successful Agile initiatives is there is no Agile evangelism. Instead, there's listening. I'll tell you exactly what question to ask and how to listen instead of evangelizing. But before I do that, I want you to feel into your system. What does it feel like to you when someone evangelizes to you, tries to sell you something, calls you up on a Sunday morning on the phone and says, hey, we'd like to sell you this product? What does that feel like to you? What do? You listen openly and no, you don't. You're like, piss off, mate, right? Put up your hand if you've gotten the piss off, mate response from leaders because you've been evangelizing. Anyone gotten that response from somebody else because you're evangelizing?
How about you're fired?
What?
How about you're fired?
Yeah, how about you're fired? That's a really good feedback, right? So I'm going to give you 2 words to help you remember it. You don't need to write this down. It's stop it! Agile evangelism doesn't work. It does not work. Stop it. Stop pushing. Pushing is not part of Agile.
Yeah.
Pulling is. Someone mentioned that earlier.
So the question here was coaching upwards.
Yeah.
So the word here, I think, is coaching. So coaching has a specific meaning coming from the world of professional coaching. And in professional coaching, one of the first things you learn on any professional coaching class is deep listening skills. And so having like deep listening skills allows us to really hear what the other person's saying and use things like powerful questions and other coaching techniques to help them find what their own problems are, what their own goals are, and then help them to align their own behaviors to their own goals. Because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them to align their behaviors to their own goals. Not what their behaviors we think they should have, or not what goals we think they should have. It's aligning their behaviors to their goals. And that's what coaching's for.
So the question is, I said I'd give you the question. He's asking them, what do you want? It's not about telling them to do Agile or selling Agile. It's asking them what they want and listening. And then you have a choice when you hear what they want. You can either help them get what they want, you can leave the organization, or you can ignore what they want, do your own thing, right? Those are your 3 options. Mostly people who are Agile evangelists pick the 3rd option of ignoring what the leader actually wants and do their own thing. That's the truth in our industry. It's shameful. I'm sorry to report it, but that's actually what happens. I hope none of you in this room are doing it, or if you are doing it, you're going to stop doing it as soon as you leave this meeting room. Okay. So that's coaching upwards in a nutshell.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yes, let's do that.
Performance management in a truly agile org. Truly agile org is what's sticking out for me. I don't know about anyone else. The performance management bit's fine. It's the truly agile org bit which I'm being triggered over.
Yeah. Put up your hand if you know what a truly agile org is. Oh, okay, yeah.
So if you think about what we've been talking about so far, then we don't actually want organisations necessarily to be truly agile. What we want is healthy dialogue, open communication between people, collaboration, such that we feel safe in the organisation to do good stuff. So so that's kind of how I'm translating this to be like a nice place to work, based on some of the agile principles. Would that be a good enough? Whoever wrote this, would that be a good enough summary for this so that we can have a conversation about it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd
awesome,
actually
thanks.
suggest something slightly different.
Okay,
Instead of
go
a
for
nice
it.
place to work, that's well and lovely, but we want organizations that are going to survive,
Yeah.
right, and thrive in the future. Which means we're actually not looking for a nice place to work necessarily. That's not the objective. The objective is a high-performance organization, which probably is a nice place to work, because if you're a nice place to work, you can get people who are motivated and engaged, right? So they go hand in
works,
hand.
yeah.
But that might be a safer thing. So performance management in a high-performance organization,
Yeah.
right? What does that look like?
Yeah. So now we can go on to the performance management part. So the first thing, let's dissect that. So the first thing is performance. So what does that look like? What does that mean? So if we define this as something that helps us survive in the marketplace and hopefully a nice place to work at the same time, then really we want to be looking at what kind of performance or what kind of metrics or what kind of measurements allow us to do that. Now, quite often when I've talked about measurements and metrics in agile organization, there's definitely a kind of like flinching and a sort of like a horrible feeling about it. But actually measurement is intrinsic into an adaptive system. So if we think about an adaptive system, what we're doing is we're trying a little bit and then we're listening. We are looking to see whether that thing worked or not. That's a measurement. And if it did work, we do more of it. And if it didn't work, well, we do less of it or something else. So measurement really comes into this whole thing about, are we measuring output? Are we measuring outcome? What kind of things help us which kind of things help us to survive? So I would look at looking at, and also the other thing I would add would be what behaviours are we going to induce by whatever measurements we're looking at. So measurement is a statement of intent. So if we have a statement of intent, what are we actually saying about the system? So if we define this truly agile org as we did about survival and a nice place to work, then we want to be measuring those things because that's our intent. If we're measuring something else, then our intent is something else and we're moving somewhere different. So I would try and look at it from that mindset.
I'll come back to answer a question with a question. Why do you want performance management? Like, what's the objective? It's trying to accomplish something.
Because traditionally individuals want to feel a sense of purpose, individual development, and be recognized for their contribution in an organization.
Okay. So you're wondering how we can create a sense of purpose through performance management.
In a way that satisfies the individual, because I don't think that goes away easily.
Yeah. Yeah. So those feel like different things, right? So my understanding of purpose and where it comes from is people believing in the purpose of the organization, understanding what it is, having some sort of intrinsic value that comes from being there, from serving the mission, from being successful. And that has nothing to do with performance management. Performance management is usually the way we judge people and we try to fix them somehow because they're broken. So yeah, that's generally I think, but I'll pause for a moment and say performance management itself is like a gigantic trap. Performance management in a high-performance organization, that concept doesn't exist in high-performance organizations.
Is this kind of almost, where does line management sit within agile teams and agility? Is that kind of what it's about? Because they're two very different things, but you need some sort of, what's my career progression? I'm a Scrum Master, I'm always going to be a Scrum Master. I'm starting to think about as a junior developer, where am I going to get to? Is it okay to become a senior developer in a team, or just a very well-rounded, very experienced developer?
Yeah.
What is my career progression? What is that performance management?
So the question is around, is this about line management? Is this about career progression? About feeling that perhaps, where am I going from here? What's my journey as a member of this organization? How do I progress? What does that mean? So I would again see that as something different than performance management per se, because performance is about how well you're doing, whereas that's more about a progression, perhaps of kind of mastery or something like that. I mean, we can answer that question as a separate question, I would say. We could do that.
I'd just like to respond to that.
Okay.
I wonder why career progression seems to be equated with job title. So for me, I went from being team member to Scrum Master, and all the time I was a team member, but I was
Yeah.
junior and
Okay.
became better. And then as I wanted to move away from that, I did a bit of development and a bit of Scrum Master, and then moved more into Scrum Master.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether or not career progression can happen
Yeah.
without the job title of it.
So I think there's two things going on here, which I think answers both. There's career progression and there's progression up the hierarchy. And they're two different things. And I think that what happens is that Agile, in general, is a non-hierarchical mindset. And we're fitting a non-hierarchical, network-based approach into a hierarchical structure. And that's where sometimes they clash. And so one thing is about learning and mastery. Maybe, like take software development, for example. You could do software development for 20 years and still be a software developer, but you'd be a damn good one, hopefully. Does that mean you have to progress to a manager now? That's a different role. But in the hierarchy, maybe you do, because that's how the hierarchy is laid out. But those are two different concepts that we should bear in mind. One is about this idea of status, money and progression in the hierarchy and reward for conforming and moving up the chain. The other one is about a deep learning and feeling satisfaction with your job and mastering whatever your skill is, which could be hopefully paid based on experience and increase in rewards as you get older and need more money, etc., based on how good you are. And they're two different concepts, I would say. That makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I worked with the organization that tried to create a completely different approach to, I hesitate to call it performance management because it wasn't, where they were looking not at the seniority or job title or hierarchy, but rather they were looking at the problems individuals were able to solve and the scope of influence in the organization.
Yeah.
And they were trying to encourage people to move through the move through is not the right expression either. To develop themselves so that they can solve more difficult problems and influence organization in a more profound way. And that was a really interesting experiment. Unfortunately, it failed because the leadership in the organization changed and everything collapsed. But it was an honorable effort towards what we're talking about.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll say some brief remarks, then I think we should probably go on to the next question after that. So I'm going to go back to performance management in a high-performance organization. In a high-performance organization, leaders, whether it's hierarchical or it's a flat structure, whoever is responsible for the whole system understands that if someone's not performing down here, 90% of the problem is with the system that's getting created. It's not the people, it's the system. We know that from Deming's work. So if there is a performance management problem, it is owned up here and the fix is up here. So doing performance management down here doesn't happen in high performance companies because everyone knows it's a waste of time. It doesn't actually lead to any significant results or any significant improvement in the company because the problems of the system actually live at the top, are created by the people at the top and supported and enabled by the people at the top. That's the first part. The second part, in a high-performance organization, we don't even talk about performance management. We talk about growth and development and learning. And that's where the focus is. So it's a totally different mental mindset around how do we approach this topic. So even just the words that alone point to us that we're trapped in this culture system based in Taylorism that was invented 100 years ago. It's a very regressive way, not aligned at all with high performance. So and why do we get stuck in these traps? Because of our education system, because of the companies we've worked in. And moving to a higher performance organization is really about letting go of our conditioning from society, is where a lot of what's really required. And we don't even understand how deep the conditioning is because we can't see it because we've grown up and this is all we know. So that's the deeper truth of moving to the deeper understanding of Agile and high performance organizations is actually about letting go of a lot of things that we hold as just normal that actually lead to bad performance. Do you have any more comments or should we?
There's one question.
Yeah.
So, whilst I agree with everything you said, I think we are still evading answering the question. There is a need in many individuals to have some kind of career path and some kind of progression laid out in front of them when they join an organization, if for nothing else, than for the reason that they believe the organization one day, and then those job titles will actually matter. Because not all organizations, well actually the majority of the organizations are not high performing and not truly agile, whatever that means. So that's part of the question.
Sure.
Is left.
Well, yeah. So actually, I think you've heard us. It's unanswered for a reason, because it doesn't make sense in a high-performance organization. If you're a high-performance organization like Zappos, pre-holacracy Zappos, they paid 10% below market. So only people who wanted to work there would actually work there. In a high-performance organization, people they usually get money off the table. So it's not about that, and people feel so actualized and so valued working there, and so able to contribute that they never go anywhere else. Or if they go somewhere else, they go, "Oh my gosh, I had it so good here." They come back, because it's not about the money, right? And the money is usually taken care of because they know that's part of creating a healthy ecosystem for people. So in a because we rephrase it in terms of a high-performance organization, this stuff doesn't come up because we're operating in very different ways from business as usual. This whole career ladder progression, that's part of this lower consciousness system that's not aligned with high performance. You have people who need to, where am I progressing my career, and that's what there is. There's no way they're going to get to high performance with those people. We have to let go of that. So if you have that in your system, that's a block. That's going to block you from getting to high performance, because you're not actually, because you have actually bought in the game. You've bought into the game of business as usual, and business as usual does not lead to high performance. So if you're in that game, sorry, bad news. That's not going to lead to. So you can play the game and get your higher salary and play the game, but that's not about what high performance is about, right? High performance, organizationally, is about moving to a very different place, which is like a much larger topic that we've kind of hinted at. Do you want to say something?
Do you think it's partly a constraint of capitalism? Why do you think related to that space that creates this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's capitalism. I'd say it's business schools, probably, right? Which is we're essentially teaching Taylorism, right? One of the things that we do in my certified leadership training is we just talk brutally, honestly about what does Taylorism look like? What are the trappings of it? What are the structures of it? And everyone looks at their organization and go, "Oh my gosh, it's still alive and well." Yeah, that's the truth of it. Simon, do you have one more comment before we close this?
The only comment I'd say is picking up on the capitalism comment around why capitalism arose in the first place, which was coming out of a sense of individualism with a set of limited resources. So if we believe that we are truly individuals on our own, you've got to look after yourself or you're screwed, and we have a set of limited resources, that will tend to behaviour where we have to fight over those resources, and that will lead on to capitalism, because they are the underlying beliefs which created capitalism. So before we can move to a non-hierarchical structure, we have to take hierarchy out of our hearts as much as we have to take it out of the organisational structures. And I see us moving now to a way that instead of being totally independent and alone, we're actually accepting that we're actually dependent on each other, as well as being independent. And this is the rise of networks, the rise of the internet, social media, all these kind of things gives us this sense that we're actually in a network. If you think about the food distribution network, no one person can keep us all alive. We're utterly dependent on the system that we live in. And acknowledging this means that there's a sense of actually, do you know what, we're always a little bit, we're all in this together. And once we can kind of look at it that way, then we can start taking this back into our teams and start saying what teams in an organisation are. What's the difference between a team and a set of individuals? Well, a team rely on each other to get the job done, whereas a set of individuals, they just do their own thing. So we know this idea of relying on each other from a team basis, but when we start thinking about the organisation and then organisations in society, we don't make that step, we don't make that jump to realise we're all in this together. And we're a long way from that in society, a long way. But that's what this is about, that's what Agile is about. It's about this collaboration rather than fighting each other, which goes back to this kind of politics kind of thing, this purpose, this sort of higher purpose, if you like, about why we're there. If we all align around that purpose, we don't need to fight each other anymore. So I just thought I'd add that about in capitalism.
It's start influencing those business schools.
Yeah, well, it's already happening actually. Business schools are already starting to look at things like lean startup. They're looking at shorter iterative cycles, ways of collaboration, those kind of things. Even MBA stuff, it's starting to come into those kind of schools now, that schools of thinking. Yeah. So it's not totally prevalent, but that is happening on those programs.
Yeah. So I'm noticing we've gone through 3 questions. And we've gone through the bulk of the time. So what I'm thinking is we'll just tackle them and maybe just be a bit briefer with her. It's actually amazing we've gone in depth and actually covered a really deep, broad range of stuff. So I'm actually thrilled with the depth we've gone in. Yeah. I'm thinking maybe we just touch base on a couple of these in a little bit shallower way.
Do you want to do a 5 minute, 3 minute?
Well, maybe we'll just aim for 3 minutes each or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Managing remote teams. You want to go?
No.
No?
No.
Yeah, so imagine you've broken your legs and you're in a wheelchair. You've broken your legs. And you go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, how can I run this marathon?" What's the doctor going to say to you?
Pay me more.
What?
What's that?
What's the doctor going to say to you? You're in this wheelchair. You go, "Doctor, how do I run this marathon? I broke my legs." Like, well, how do I do it?
Use your arms.
Use your arms. Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's like, you ain't running this marathon, dude. The best you can do is like wheel yourself along. It's going to be painful and hard, but you can make progress. You're not going to be able to run it. You can like limp along through it. So the question is, what does this story have to do with distributed teams? What does this have to do with distributed teams?
It's hard to distribute teams when some of the teams, as part of the team, is not. That's how I view it.
Okay.
I'm stuck with it.
Yeah.
What's
Maybe.
that?
Yeah.
I'm stuck with it.
You're stuck with it. I'm going to start talking about what is the outcome? Like, what does that have to do with distributed teams? What does the story mean for distributed teams?
Does that assumption mean you don't believe remote teams could be high performing?
That's what the story says, right? The story says that if you're in a remote team, if you have remote teams, you're hosed. You will never, ever get to high performance, right? That's what the story says, right? So the question is, in what percentage of cases is that true? I'd say that in 99% of cases that's true. If you're remote, you're going to get shitty performance, period. Period. Now, there's some exceptions, like we know Linux kernel was built by a distributed team all over the world. If you have highly engaged, highly motivated people who are highly committed to being up at all hours of the night to communicate with each other, they have fire in their belly, if you have those people, you can make distributed work.
Why is that?
Because they're committed to making it work no matter what, right? Because they're highly motivated.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you some...
It doesn't work 99% of the time.
Pardon?
Why does it work in 99%?
Because 99% of the time we don't have highly engaged, motivated people. We have people who are told to do stuff and they don't have a sense of meaning or purpose because we've got a low performance company, because we have this hierarchy that's sucking the lifeblood out of people. That's why. Sorry, yes?
Some startups, they intentionally have a business model that only have remote teams.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to be doing fine. It's not high performing. So
So what's going on there? What's going on there?
She said a key part of it is everyone is remote.
Everyone's remote,
So,
yeah.
so what's happening there? If they're working well and they're remote, what are the key things that's happening with that in that situation for those startups to make that work? What is the ingredient there?
they're small,
Small,
they communicate a lot,
communicate a lot,
they don't have a hierarchy yet.
don't have a hierarchy sucking the lifeblood out of them.
I think they have equal voice, actually.
Equal
When
voice.
everyone is remote, you can achieve that.
So equal voice, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
And what would that? What would you? How would you feel if you were working in a team that had equal voice, that you didn't have interference from a hierarchy? You were working in a startup with lots of hope and the fact that this could become massive. Well, how would that make you feel?
1%,
Yeah. Yeah.
But all things being equal, face-to-face communication It's leaps and bounds more evolved than
So-
chatting down a Skype call.
Yeah, so let's just say, put up your hand if you're in a situation where you have distributed teams.
Right now.
Okay, yeah, right now. So that's the reality. So organizationally, to get to high performance, your best move, if it's possible, may not always be possible, is to eliminate the distributed teams and get everyone in one location. Right? That's. I'm gonna say a few things, and people can ask questions. Like number one, right? So if you're in charge of the organization, like who in their mind set this up? Said, I want to build a high performance organization. I'm gonna have a lab here, and a lab here, right? Like no one in their right mind would do that. Usually it happens through acquisition, and we have to try to make it work somehow. But that's no one would intentionally do this, to set up a distributed lab with people in different time zones all over the world speaking different languages. Like that's
It's cheaper.
no, it's not cheaper. It costs a lot more money. There's no. If you look at the evidence, if you actually look at the evidence, distributed costs way more money. But people do distributed because their buddy's doing it or they heard about it, right, and think it's a cool move, or we think we'll save costs. But when you actually look at the real costs of projects, the delays, the actual cost because of communication barriers, it's way, way higher. Like it's ridiculous. Anyway, so I'll finish my story. So yeah, if you're in charge of this, like that's my number one recommendation is like, if you have labs all over the world, how's this working for you? I ask executives I work with, they go, oh, not very well. We have all these communication problems, we have all these challenges. And it's like, well, why do you have this many labs? How do you decide that? And they go, it happened by accident. We didn't mean to have a lab in Colombia. It just kind of started, and now we do. And I go, well, what do you want to do about it, right? And they go, well, we should probably close it down because we never really planned to do that anyway. It just happened accidentally. Like, this is the kind of conversation that happens. So anyway, so that's the number one best move you can make, if that makes sense. Sometimes you need those genius people in a different location, right? The other thing that we do in Agile is we get everyone together, we fly everyone together. Flying people around is part of the cost of distributed. Successful distributed companies fly everyone. If you can't pay for the cost of a flight, you're going to pay 5 times that cost in broken communication and project delays. Right? That's the math. So get everyone together and get whole teams. So everyone in the team in the same location is a full team. If you're talking about Scrum, like product owner, developers, testers. None of this, developers are here, testers are there, product is there. That's like a total nightmare disaster.
So some organizations I know make a conscious decision to move towards distributed teams. And the main reason I've seen this when I've talked to their exec and their finance department about why they did this is because what happens is organizations are very cost-based accounting. So we look at things in terms of cost. And if you look on a spreadsheet, if we have our low-paid friends working in some other country and you add up the number of hours that they spend and the number of hours people work in, say, a more expensive country like the UK, then looking at it on a spreadsheet, it does lower the cost on a spreadsheet. But if we actually turn that around and start measuring outcome and lost opportunity and the cost of delay, this is where the costs actually start spiraling. But we don't measure those normally from a finance perspective. So these are hidden costs. So on the bottom line, the cost in the finance sheets.
Yeah, we're doing better and better as a company financially, but our results are worse and worse. We don't understand why our projects are taking so long, right?
Simon, it's difficult to measure those costs. That's the problem, isn't it? Is that the company's doing that because they think they're saving money, but then it comes back to the performance management. I mean, you don't want in an agile team with a remote team to be like hammering this and look how rubbish it is.
Yeah.
Measuring that cost and showing it back to the company.
So it's hard to measure those costs. So what's the highest priority from an agile perspective? Think about from the agile perspective. Sorry, say again.
Delivering value.
Delivering value to the customer. And in Lean, what's one of the most fundamental things? What is it? One of the Lean principles. Reducing waste is one thing. Small batch sizes. Customer first. So it's customer first. View things from a customer perspective. So if we view things from a customer perspective and look at it from an Agile Manifesto, on the back it says, I was thinking of it on the back. It's actually the principles. On the back of the Agile Manifesto, it says our highest priority, and it's the first principle, our highest priority is to satisfy our customers. So if that's our highest priority, what are we measuring? We're measuring the cost of putting people all over the place. It doesn't make sense. So the question was, how do you measure this stuff? How can we measure this stuff? Well, how many customers return is a good measurement. You know, what kind of customers are returning, the happiness of our customers, how quick we're getting stuff to our customers, those kind of things. And when we start measuring things in terms of customer buying and how much value we're getting and the satisfaction and customer retention, then we start to optimize our organization around those, and distributed teams don't make any sense to deliver value to the customer.
Why not?
Because of the delays. Because if we're thinking about how quick can we get to the customer, and if we want to get things quick, why do we want to get things quick? It's nice for them to have things quick, but we're really lowering risk. We want to lower risk by building something that they want, so we need quick feedback cycles. So with a faster feedback cycle, we need a more efficient organization to get stuff to the customer. If we distribute our teams and put people in either silo teams like database teams, test teams, things like that, or we split people over the world, what we're doing is we're creating handoff and delay. And handoff and delay lengthens the cycle time, which increases risk.
And what if the user is online?
If the user is online? Well, it's the same thing, whether we're delivering software or we're giving them an actual product. It's still about how quickly can we get that new feature or new release or update to our users. And if we've got to engage, like I had one organisation where we wanted to upgrade a bit of security, we worked out it was going to take 6 weeks to deliver this thing. It took 22 teams all over the world to communicate together to be able to deliver this. It took 9 months to figure out how to engage all those teams so that we could actually get them together. And some teams said, well, I'm not going to tell you where the form is to engage us because you haven't engaged us yet. So 9 months it took us to get all these teams in a room. And then I had them for 1 day to explain what we wanted to do. 6 weeks worth of work. And so I got them all in the day, we explained what we're doing. At the end of the day I said, have we got commitment for this? Are we, as a group of now new team, one person from 22 different teams, 22 people, are we going to commit to this? And they all kind of went, we can't. We've got other priorities, we've got other stuff we're doing. Our teams are working on all these other different things. And that whole project just kind of went south and it never really happened. So that's not getting stuff done. We're not optimized in that way at all for serving the customer.
So I think a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is that kind of we've put at the doors of the leadership team, and in this particular case the CFO as well. But I think us as individuals, we also have responsibility. I see there being a great trend to trying to work from home as much as possible. But I think we've got to ask ourselves, where do we deliver value, the most value? And that's quite often getting back in the office, getting back with our team members, getting back in front of our stakeholders and customers. Therefore, I think this is an opportunity where we can take responsibility ourselves as well.
It's actually a great thing you work there, working from home. So we all want to be able to work from home, but Agile kind of like, Alistair Coburn's stuff, the work he did back in the late 90s, which shows how co-located teams with the information radiators and absorption of information, that seems to be better. But we know that we want to work from home too, because that's the modern economy. No one wants to commute 2 hours to work. There is no right answer. It's about balancing. This is why it's so hard. If there was one right answer, we all should work in one office all the time. That'd be easy, right? But it's context-based. So there's no one, you have to balance all these different factors to make an organization work. And that's why it has to come down to mindset and purpose. So we can optimize around a customer focus with the right mindset. Then all these little decisions about who should work where fall out of that.
Yeah. I'll just add that, just riff on that. If you have a team, it's an agile team, you're being people friendly. You say, well, team, what kind of team do we want to be? We're trying to be a high performance team, or we're trying to be a math team? Okay. Like, trying to be a crappy team? What kind of team are we trying to be? What kind of team are we right now? What kind of team do we aspire to be? If we aspire to be a high performance team, let's imagine that scenario. The question is, well, what are we doing about working from home? And there'll be a discussion about, well, what's the impact? And usually when that happens, people say, well, these are the core hours, everyone's here. Or people can work from home, but we're picking this day, so we all go work from home. Or people need to go for different days because you need appliance deliveries, whatever. And this is what we're doing around it, so that we balance people's needs to be looked after, which is important, and high performance in the organization, getting stuff done, which is important. So people work out, how do we support the needs of the individual and the needs of the team or the organization, right? And that's called being adults. Right? And like Simon said, there is no one answer because it's based on the context. And that's what we see in high performance organizations, that we have the maturity to have conversations about there's this tension and how do we want to handle this? And what experiment do we want to run? And how's this working for us? And do we want another experiment now? Okay, let's move on.
I just wanted to add in, 'cause what I'm seeing is like, just for a moment to stop the leadership management bashing, because what I'm seeing right now is that I'm seeing a lot of the management I'm talking to really actually see that they don't want a distributed approach. They actually really do want to have on-site, but they're coming up about the challenge around there not being enough. It's like, how can we actually get something happening locally? Because we can't find the people. We're tapping out the market. There's a massive need for more people in IT. And so one of the reasons that they're always looking at options of how can we bring people together, but a big driver is, it's good that the message is getting through, that distributed it can often is usually more costly, but there is a massive hit issue here around how can we actually still deliver the work and get things done when there's a tap.
So, do you mind if I?
Sure.
So, the need for more IT people is a direct result of the structural choices that we choose in the organisation. So I know that the Bank of America, for example, has about 30,000 people in its IT department. I know that some of these other big banks have tens of thousands of people in the IT department. There are enough IT people. The problem is that the way we structure ourselves is so dysfunctional in terms of organisation from the customer that we are required to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. And it's actually that which causes the lack of number of people, and we're always going to need more and more the more we carry on structuring like this.
Yeah, the truth is most organizations are wasting talent.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree there is a waste in that perspective and not really investing enough in helping people have some transferable skills in that. But at the end of the day, what I'm seeing is that it's like how can there is that perception around we don't have the people locally to do this.
So the thing is, if you look at, I don't know if you have Glassdoor here in the UK, but if people know you're an amazing place to work, they'll come there. The problem is that we have places that are not amazing places to work because we have this sort of nonsense going on. And we have a reputation of actually being a horrible, aggressive place to work, and then we can't hire people. So then we go distributed, right? But the core of the problem is that people don't want to come work there, right? These, young millennials who have full of energy and passion don't want to work in our crappy organizations, right? And if you're on that thing, it's just a number of years, decades till you're out of business because you can't actually hire people. Distributed just putting it off a little bit longer, but distributed just a step to delay the death cycle, right? But the death cycle is already well in place and your organization's going out of business. So it's just a matter of time. I'm going to give you guys the truth because you guys are adults, you can hear it.
So I will say one thing about, there's another comment, can I grab the pen?
Yeah.
I just want to cover something also that's really, I think is really key, because I think that perhaps we've kind of got quite a high octane kind of discussion going on here, right? That's what I feel. It feels like full on. And this is great because it's like getting some stuff out, right? So I just want to say, because we've been going leadership this, leadership that, and what I really want to just emphasize the fact that this isn't about leadership bashing. This is actually, there's a reason why we're talking about leadership here. And that is because there's a reinforcing cycle going on here, which is why Agile and moving organizations to a better way of working is happening. So there's a reinforcing cycle. And if you think about what this cycle is, we have leadership as Michael, let's do this in capitals, leadership. And leadership have the ability, structure, and by structure we can affect culture. So the beliefs that happen from a leadership perspective create the process and structure of the organisation, and the structure of the organisation affects the culture. The leaders operate within that culture and are often just as powerless as everybody else to change the organisation that they run. However, when their mindset changes, they are able to make small incremental changes to try out things in structure. By changing the incremental structure, we get a change in culture and people start collaborating, they start working remotely maybe, they do these things to start working together, which creates a positive feedback cycle. We know we can't change culture directly, so we have two levers. The levers we have to change organizations are leadership and structure. And we know that we can't change structure without leadership, so we start here.
I'll add one more thing, which is also when leadership shows up differently, and there are lots of case studies that talk about this, like Turn the Ship Around. They kept all the structures, everyone in the same submarine, but because the leadership was showing up differently, the culture changed, right? So leadership, again, is the place to start if we want to move towards a high-performance organization. And everyone here in this room, you can be a leader. I'll show you how. You're involved in some smaller piece of the organization. You can be a leader in your small piece of organization and affect change there. Your team, your department, etc., and so on. I want to touch on one last question, because I think we're out of time here. This unfreezing the frozen middle. I'd just like to inform you there is no frozen middle. The understanding there's a frozen middle is a misunderstanding of reality. It's a misunderstanding of reality. The frozen middle says there are people at the bottom who get it, there are people at the top who get it, and the people in the middle are frozen. They're somehow deficient, wrong, broken, stuck, whatever, right? And that's not actually true. What's actually happening is the leaders at the top don't really walk the talk. If they walk the talk and they modeled the collaboration, the learning and growth down here, if they did that, if they held themselves to that standard of behaving with the Agile mindset, and they held the people who report into that standard, we just see a cascade of new behaviors in the organization. But we don't. So what can we infer about the leaders? Yeah. They're just talking the talk. They're not actually walking the talk. If they walk the talk and they model the new behaviors, we'd start seeing shifts happening in the organization. This notion of Agile, where we try to build things from the grassroots, doesn't work. It's like the Chinese at Tiananmen Square. Freedom, freedom! And the tanks come out and they're all dead, right? Like, this is literally what happens in our organizations, that we try to start these Agile initiatives at the bottom, and we don't have tanks in our companies. We just have an Agile initiative that takes 18 months to 3 years to fail, an Agile transformation. That's the industry standard. So my advice is to stop it. Stop it. And focus instead on what do the leaders in the organization want, and how can we help them, and do positive local change. So that's my message of hope, is focus on change at a smaller scale, and you will find success. Yeah. Do you have any closing comments?
No, we've probably got 10 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. We give her then.
8 minutes.
All right. Do you have anything on freezing the frozen middle?
Not in the frozen middle. I think you've pretty much summed that up for me. I think that being inclusive is really important. I think the only thing I'll say on that is, wherever that model is, in this model, there's actually a bit more to this. If we're looking at leadership changing structure around this way, then what we're not looking for is a top-down, you must do this, because that's just as bad as where we were before. By doing that, you create a resistance. And that might be what you mean by the frozen middle. But what happens is that resistance point is actually is an amazing thing, and this is where the real work of Agile coaching happens. So by creating a resistance point, what we're actually doing is we are making transparent people's behaviours and the misalignment of their own goals and their behaviours, as I was saying before. So this is a coaching opportunity to align somebody's own goals with their own behaviours. And when we do that, when we actually use that coaching technique, then we quite often adapt what came down until we're all kind of happy with the incremental structure change, and then this can take place. So it's not kind of completely top down, but it has to start there, and then coaching through these alignment of behaviours and goals. Does anyone? I think we're pretty much out of time now. we've got some pizzas and drinks and things. So before we do that, I would just like to say thank you to Michael for coming all the way over here to I don't know, kind of answer questions with me. So thank you, Michael.